Good to see you all with this new topic in the social media platform. So I am Aishwarya, Assistant Professor, the Department of Biomedical Engineering from Mrs.Aiswarya College of Engineering. So now let's move into the section. So today's topic is RAM. RAM is random access memory. So RAM stands for random access memory. It is the computer's temporary working memory that stores data that its reference currently use. So whatever you are doing now, presently, that will be stored there in RAM. That is the random access memory. It is actually called as a temporary storage. So see, this is the RAM. What is RAM? Primary memory of a computer is called as the RAM. Okay, is a primary memory, also is called as a temporary memory. Okay, allows fast access to data. It allows fast data accessible. And volatile memory, that is data is lost and power is turned on. Volatile memory, what is volatile, non-volatile? So volatile memory means it lost the data when the power is turned off. So see, this is the function of the RAM. That is, CPU loads the information to the RAM. A valid boot disk is found. Then it's given the operating system is loaded, taking control of the CPU. So first BAS, binary input output system, instructions are passed from the RAM to the CPU. So the input is given from the CPU to the RAM. Once the CPU loads the information to the RAM, again the valid boot disk is found whether it to be stored or not. Then the operating system is loaded, taking control to the CPU. So this is what happens in the function of the RAM. Okay. Again, history of RAM. Early magnetic core memory. So what is the history of RAM? It is actually made up of early magnetic core memory and then a semiconductor RAM introduced in the 1960s, and a modern DDR memory is also modern memory technologies is also introduced in this magnetic core memory and semiconductor introduced in the 60s, and again the DDR is also introduced. So let's characteristics of it. The characteristics actually is high speed, temporary storage, read and write capabilities, the quality nature, so it has high speed access, temporary storage, that is a memory storage. Storage temporarily, it reads and write capabilities are very high. If it is volatile nature means if this power is switched on, then the data collected will be also get deleted. So that is called as volatile nature. Types of RAM, there are two types, static RAM and dynamic RAM. Static RAM is mentioned as SRAM and the dynamic RAM is mentioned as DRAM. So let's see detail what's the types. So the computer memory has two types, internal and external. So the internal is called the main memory or primary memory, and the external memory is called the secondary memory in two types. Again, the internal memory has two types, that is ROM and RAM. So now we are seeing about RAM. So RAM is a volatile memory and ROM is a non-volatile memory. Again, the external memory is used with four types, HDD, SSD, compact disc and USB flash drive. That is the external, which we are adding additionally. So these are the internal memories. So now we are seeing RAM, and RAM has SRAM and DRAM. Again, the DRAM is divided into SDRAM, RDRAM, DDR, SDRAM. Okay. Again, this DDR, SDRAM is divided into DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, DDR4. So these are the types of RAM memories. Okay. So see, computer has two, internal and external. The internal is again about the ROM and RAM. Now we are detailing studying about the RAM, is the volatile memory, and the RAM is again divided into SRAM and DRAM, and static and dynamic. Again, the DRAM is divided into SDRAM, RDRAM, DDR, SDRAM. Again, this DDR-RAM is divided into DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. Okay? See the full form, random access memory, DRAM is dynamic random access memory, SRAM is static random access memory, DDR is double data rate, okay? DDR 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you as well, right? So that is what? Double data rate. So these are L1, level 2, level 3, all these are the full forms for the different types of RAMs. We are doing so types of RAMs. SSD, this one is to SSD. This is the compact disk. This is the RAM. Okay. So evaluation of so the different number of pins, the different spacing of this person content. Okay. So different types of pins of RAMs are used. So this is 30 pin, this is 72 pin, this is micro DAM, this is 194. Has 100 pins between 72, 144, 20, 200, 160, 184, 240, 240, 204, 250, DDR3. Okay, so all these are the different types of RAMs which have different number of pins. Okay, so as per the number of pins, the spacing of sources of temperatures will be also different. Okay, understand? So static RAM. What is static RAM actually? Static RAM is called SFM. So it is faster than the dynamic RAM. If you can dynamic and static, but when compared to static RAM, the dynamic faster than dynamic RAM. That is the static RAM. So this one, the refresh is normal. Actually, we used to be reflection immediate, right? But for static RAM, reflection is immediate, right? That means the expensive compared to dynamic RAM. We also used CPU cache. CPU cache is all used. The dynamic periodic refresh. The dynamic periodic refresh is used. This is especially compared to the RAM. The higher storage capacity compared to the static RAM. Dynamic has higher storage capacity. This is the main system memory. So dynamic is not a main memory, but I'm sorry, static is not the main memory, but dynamic RAM is considered as a main system memory. Okay. With random access memory is a primary memory of the computer used to store data and instructions temporarily while the CPU is processing them. So it is also called the random access memory because any memory location can be accessed directly into the sum of regardless of its positions. So the characteristics may be it is volatile memory for state. So what is the name of this name? So DDR RAM is the DDR1, DDR2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I have mentioned this dynamic RAM type also into DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, DDR4. So this is one of the simple block diagram for RAM. So why RAM is needed? We need to follow. So RAM acts as a working memory for the CPU. Okay, the CPU, the working memory contains being broader than necessary. So until whether it is right or not later, the working memory condition is very necessary. So for the working memory condition, the RAM is released from the CPU. So without RAM, programs cannot execute efficiently. Without RAM memory, the programs cannot be efficiently executed. Then the data processing becomes very slow. Okay. So every operations we have to access the hard disk, which is much smaller, okay, much slower. So if there's no memory, every program has for execution has to go to hard disk. Okay, even if the program is very simple, it must go to hard disk and it can be executed. But there's no RAM memory. So the RAM memory is very necessary for the working data storage for that signal. So the Microsoft Word or the browser is open. What does it do? So the program is run with hard disk or SSD. Then it is copied into the RAM. Then again the CPU executes the program from the RAM. Okay. So likewise this way the process gets happened. Okay. So this is what the block diagram. Here I input data of 8 bit is given data and the address bit 50 is given to the IDFS, the chip select is given to CS and the read only is given, and then the output data is done. So this is 32 bit 8 bit RAM. Okay, here is last basic common as the RAM, which is contained as the data is in here. The input data is connected, ADRS will address bits are connected, and then CS, that is the chip selector, which is the chip SAS, chip select class result in CS, and the read or write program will be given in this R bar W bar. Then the output data is shown in the output data bar. Okay. So how does it work? Okay. See, first what happens is the user opens an application. Whoever the user or customer is going to, they will open the application. Operating systems loads the application into the RAM. So what happens? The operating system loads will get the applications into the RAM. Then the CPU fetches the instruction from the RAM. The CPU will take the instruction from the RAM. So the CPU processes the data again after taking the data from the RAM. It starts the CPU started processing the data. Now the results are shown temporarily in the RAM. Now what happens? The results will be analyzed in this temporarily in the RAM because RAM is a temporary memory, so volatile memory. It is shown separately in the RAM. The power is switched off. RAM knows that all the stored data, whatever stored in the data, whatever visible, whatever stored, whatever data is displayed, everything will get erased because it is called a volatile memory. Volatile memory means what? We have already said. Volatile memory means it will get deleted after the second is switched off or powered off. So this is happens. The CPU requires the data, the RAM stores active program, and it is be transferred from CPU to RAM. So CPU to RAM, the data is still transferred. Access memory where I have to read text that is given, then the reader write that is given, and whether it is given state the powers and the data is came to the CPU. The importance of RAM. Why RAM is important because fast application mobility reach of the is faster, then better multitasking, improve system performance, better system performance. That is when we see from downwards to upwards, the speed decreases and capacity increases. Okay. So difference between RAM and told RAM is we are saying now, which is RAM access memory, and one is read-only memory, where it is later, that is, it is switched, it gets deleted, all the data is in the memory will get deleted when the power is switched off, and here it is non-relative, they will get deleted. Read and write to them too. In both options are available, but in no only read options, read only memory, full name is read only memory. So as per the name, it has only the read option. The temporary storage, it is a permanent storage. It is faster, but only should be stored when compared to me. Okay, this is the difference between animals. In the picture also you can see this is the RAM and this is the room. Okay, here's the and that one. This is RAM temporary. Okay. RAM capacity. What may be the capacities of RAM? 4 GB, 8 GB, 16 GB, 32 GB, and 64 GB, and above is also there. Okay, the beginning was at 4 GB, and then 6 GB. When you go to buy a phone, we pay last, right? Email memory card, 100 DVD, GB, extras, right? But RAM is also having a certain GBs of capacity. That is 4 GB, 8, 16, 50, and more than that. Modern technology is more number of no number of GBs are available in market. Factors affecting the RAM performance. What are factors that are affecting the performance of this capacity, speed, latency, channel qualifications? They are all affecting the performance of RAM. As it is shown here, converts to upgrades. The capacity increases, but the speed is reduced. So this is one of the factors affecting the performance of random access memory. Applications. What are applications that are actually used in computers, smartphones, personal computers, laptops, tablets, servers, gaming consoles, embedded systems, servers, everywhere. So it's access and difficult to access the data, and for them it is very much necessary. In order to do that, there should be available to initiate the process very effectively and to performance capacity. So graph, examples from study graph, data is data, synchronous is data means synchronous data means double data, video and data, India, non-data, mobile system, and graphics to these are the examples. The type of elements that is another one. But examples, there is also this only graphics diagram, deputy diagram, video diagram, non-data diagram, and digital. So these are all the examples for the star. Main advantages. What advantages it has? There is very speed access area, high speed. There supports multitasking. Many tasks can be done at the single time. Then improve system responsiveness. And easy to upgrade in many systems. In a single time, you can use to upgrade many systems. Then easily random access, very fast access. Then suppose maybe some operations possible. What are the operations are possible? They can be done in both read and write because it is also meant as we know random access memory can do both reading and writing process. Okay, so it is not advantages. As per the limited disadvantages or limitations, it is a volatile memory. Volatile memory means what? When we are doing something and it is getting stored in the memory, but when switched off, where it is there, it will get deleted automatically. That's the relation memory that the biggest disadvantage of RAM. And then this is costable. When to increase the gigabytes, there is we have to increase the capacity, we will add more number of RAMs. So the increase in the number of RAMs is always increasing the cost. So data is lost after shutdown. So that is what I remember when you do all the data you get, whatever is stored in the RAM, there is a random access memory. After when it's switched off, all the data will get deleted, shutdown. Which is good. So maybe DDR6 can be done. Up to now, DDR5 is it is double-rate. The RAM 5 is developed, but maybe the development of DDR6, DDR7 can be also placed development. So LPDDR is there, but some improvements can be also given to them in the future. The AI optimized memory. So AI techniques can be also included in the memory. So fast and more energy efficient technologies can be also used here. Fast and more energy efficient technologies. Know that more fast, so it is actually faster one comparing to random access memory. So in the future, more and more faster energy efficient technologies of RAM memory can be also used. So as per the conclusion, is that RAM is essential for computer performance. So RAM is very important for the computer performance, the CPU performance, efficient data and executing data. So temporarily stores active data. So always temporarily stores the data actively because it will follow the memory. So it gets deleted sometimes. So even though it needed so very sharp in order to execute programs. So more RAM and this the computer. So when simply targets, it is very difficult to execute the program. So when more number of RAMs are added or execute the program computed, then it is very easy for them to complete the program. So as per the very summary, the RAM is a primary member for a computer. So it's the primary memory is the relative memory. So it's memory stores data and instructions for the CPU. What are the data included for the CPU to execute the programs? It can all be stored in the RAM, that is random access memory. And RAM is a variety of suppose random access. So this as per the name gives us random access memory. It accesses it supposes the random access of all the memories, and it is a volatile and fast and cheaper. Picking has two types. As we know, SRAM and DRAM. SRAM is called as static and DRAM is called as dynamic, and SRAM is faster using a cache memory, and DRAM is a dynamic, which is cheap and used in a main memory. Okay, so this is a summary of this RAM. There is random access memory. We also the block diagram. Introduction, what is that, how it characteristics, when is it needed, what are the uses, what are the key types, what are the block diagrams, what are the types, what are the applications, what are the limited advantages, where to be applied in real life, and how capacities are varied. So everything is discussed. So these are about random access memory. So I hope you all understand the section. So please do like the video, and if you have any doubt, please do comment below. So thank you.